Hi, I'm Joan Agajanian Quinn, and welcome to the Beverly Hills View. Our guest is author Marc Grossberg, who was born and raised in Houston, Texas. He graduated from public school, the University of Houston, and the University of Texas Law School. He came to California and took the bar without a review course, which is like a big deal. He clerked for a very famous federal judge named Walter Raleigh Ely, who happened to be my husband's partner in the firm, Cattison, Quinn, and Ely was actually Ely, Cattison, and Quinn. He's friends of Elizabeth and Nate Snyder, whose daughter, Christine, is a federal judge and lives in Beverly Hills with her husband, lawyer Mark Seltzer. And the best connection for Mark is my co-host on Beverly Hills View, Josh Gross. Josh is Mark's second cousin, and you know Josh. He publishes the Beverly Hills Weekly. We love Josh. So Mark has been practicing law in Houston, and I suppose writing this novel, The Best People, A Tale of Trials and Errors, for I don't know how long. So let's see, Mark, how long has it been?
Well, this is embarrassing, but I started it 23 years ago.
Oh, it is embarrassing.
Well, actually 24 now. But yeah, 1996, I did the first draft.
Well, we're going to talk about it. But first of all, how is Josh your cousin?
Okay.
Josh Gross.
His great-grandfather and my grandfather were brothers.
Oh, that's great.
And then his branch cut off the Berg.
Somewhere along the way?
Right, and somehow got rid of the poverty gene.
Did they leave Texas? Were they in Texas?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh. So I haven't detected any accents, but I haven't detected them with either one of you. The person who did have the accent was Judge Ely.
Yes.
Judge Walter Ely. And was he a family friend?
No. I was selected by the dean of the Texas Law School, Paige Keaton. Walter had just gone on the bench, and he said, I want to alternate between SC and Texas, and I'm going to start with Texas. And he sent, I interviewed him, and this guy walks in the room, and he's got on this tall, handsome, he's got on a checked hat and a turtleneck sweater and a sport coat. And I'm looking, I'm thinking, this must be the judge's man. You know, where's the judge? And he says, I'm Federal Judge Ely. And I said, oh, really? And from that point, we just hit it off and became best friends.
But he was also best friends with Lyndon Johnson, and that's how he got appointed, right?
Yes.
I mean, he was qualified, but Lyndon was his friend in Texas.
Yes.
Did you know the Johnson family?
No.
So you're not connected. You're just the smart person who came in from the law school.
Basically, that would be correct.
So what?
But I will say this, that after he passed away, his son called me and said, the Ninth Circuit wants my father's desk, a present from
Jack Quinn
and Stewart. And it was this gorgeous Monteverdi Young desk. And he says, I don't want the Ninth Circuit to have it. No one in the family should have it. You should have it.
Oh.
And so for 20 years, I used Walter's desk.
Oh.
And then my firm sort of downsized the size of offices, and now it is at the University of Texas School of Law.
Oh, I'm so
in a special
happy.
Room. Yeah.
I'm so happy. Jack had the matching Monteverdi desk too, because
Really?
that's why Walter had it. Our decorator, who was from Lowry's, her family was one of the Lowry's founders on La Cienega, also in Beverly Hills, designed those desks and bought them from Monteverdi, which was on Beverly Boulevard right down the street. This is so great. So what were you doing as a clerk? What were your duties?
My duties were, if he was assigned an opinion, I would do a draft of his opinion. He was very hands-on, but
he wrote the opinion, then you would do the draft, or you drafted first?
Usually it was the other way around. I'd do a draft and he would rewrite it, but sometimes he would do it and I would rewrite it. His dissents were a lot of fun because he liked to dissent.
Always, right? Yeah. So did you do anything else in the office? Because you were here only for a year and you know Los Angeles like the back of your hand.
Well, when I left the office, I did a lot of stuff, but mostly when I was at the office, he and I would just sit around and talk. Sometimes we'd talk about the work, but other times we'd talk about everything.
He was great. He was a wonderful mentor for my husband as well. So talking and being in that office, did it influence the kind of law you were going to practice? Or had you decided at that time?
I really didn't decide what kind of law I was going to practice. When I graduated college, I was 20 and a political science major, and there weren't any jobs for political scientists, so I got a job as an accountant. I passed the CPA exam, and then when I went to work, they said, "Oh, you have the CPA, you're going to be a tax lawyer." I thought I was going to be another Clarence Darrow. But,
Oh, so that's what happened?
Yeah.
So it wasn't really an influence from clerking?
No, but it raised the bar. Being around Walter raised the bar for what I thought was good law.
And we mentioned Christine Snyder. She's on the same court. Well, he was on the circuit, right?
Yeah, and she's a district court judge.
Yeah, she's a district. Did you consider staying in LA at that time?
I did. The reason I didn't stay, it's hard to believe, but back in those days, the large law firms in Houston weren't hiring Jews, and I was the first observant Jew to get hired by any of the large law firms, and I felt I had a duty to, go back and be Jackie Robinson.
You mean
or Jackie Rabinowitz, however you want.
Stay in Houston, you mean?
Yes.
Because it wasn't happening here.
No, of course not. But I did have the bar here.
Oh, then did you take it there?
I took it in Texas before I left, and then I took it here. Walter gave me 3 days off to take the bar.
Oh, you took it in Texas before you came.
Yeah.
Well, the book that took 24 years to write or whatever is about family law.
Yes.
It's quite different from tax law.
Yes.
And why is that? How did you know about family law?
Well, one, I've had 2 divorces. 2, I have worked.
Did you use those? Did you use those lawyers?
I'm just doing it to get even. No. Plus, I've worked with a lot of family lawyers on divorce cases because it comes up a lot where the spouse hasn't filed tax returns or owes a lot of money, and there become significant tax. All of a sudden, it becomes known. And so usually I'm working with the wife, and she assumes that the husband has been filing everything or paying everything, and it hasn't. So I got to know a lot of family lawyers that way.
So it actually did, your practice actually did influence what you knew about writing in this book.
Yeah.
So why did it take so long, and why did you start it in the first place?
Well, I wanted to write a book before I wanted to be a lawyer. I was 16 when I first wanted to write a book. So I got an idea in 1996. I sat down and I did a first draft, and then I didn't touch it for a long time.
So what was your first draft? Just like a page, what you wanted the story to tell?
No, it was the full story. But I mean, I didn't know how to write a novel, so it was all dialogue. I mean, there was no description, and it just went on. So it took me a long time.
Then did you go to classes? Did you go to group workshops or what?
Much later, I did, and that made a big difference.
But you had already started writing, and then you went to group, then you went to workshops.
And got editors.
And what are they, when you go to a workshop, how does that help you? You've already written your book.
Well, the other people in the class will read and comment on your stuff, and there's a lot of, "Oh, I never thought about that. Oh, you couldn't see that?" It's very helpful.
They critique your work?
Yes.
And so were you rewriting all this time? Were you going to classes and rewriting?
Oh yeah, I did. I think I did more than 100 drafts, including reading it out loud, at least 5 times. Somebody who interviewed me said, "You wrote 100 drafts? Then this really isn't your first novel."
Exactly. Yeah. So, how frustrating was that? Rewriting and rewriting.
No, I just wanted to get it right.
When you started writing, I know you're from the era, like Jack was, my husband was, of yellow pads. He used to write everything on a yellow pad. What was your process for writing the book?
The first draft was on a computer.
Oh, it was? On
a laptop, but I used yellow pads. I printed and marked up, and
that's what you love to do.
any way to do it. And sometimes I'd think of a phrase that I wanted in there, and I'd get up in the middle of the night and just go and scratch that in and then go back to sleep.
When did you know it was finished? How do you know when it's finished? It's like a painting, you know? Is it finished? Is it not finished?
Well, there were several times when I thought it was finished when it wasn't.
That's what I mean. How do you do
But
that?
I knew the last draft it was done.
Had someone read it and told you this is it, it's great?
Yes.
Or when you said you brought editors in, what kind of editors did you bring in?
Some were teams, some were individuals.
But
I used
just
several.
Did they do different things? That's what I meant. The editors, do they look at different things? Do they each editor have his own view of what you're doing?
Yes. And I think what the editor, a lot of them, what they helped was this book was about 2 times as long.
Oh, that's the other thing, right?
So
they edit, boom, boom.
Well, yeah, they kept saying, don't have anything in there that doesn't drive the story. And so there was a lot of stuff that I thought was just terrific writing, but it wasn't necessary to the story, you know.
But that's so hard to take that criticism because,
No.
I mean, I read the book and it's really readable. You know, you can go through it really fast. And, but it's, you know, cleared of all the things that you're talking about.
Well, it wasn't hard. I mean, what I wanted was a good book, okay? And so if I was too sensitive to...
Yeah.
And besides that, I was in charge. I didn't have to accept all the suggestions.
I know, but it's
But
still,
I accepted
right?
a lot of them.
Yeah. So you talked about knowing these family lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
How did you develop your characters?
It was, except for one, a minor character, all the family lawyers are totally invented.
Oh, they're all invented?
Totally invented. No one could find themselves in there. But the events and everything, those are partial glimpses that I've had over the last 50 years. And I would combine those characteristics into one character or another. I'd like to think each character had his own voice and sounded authentic.
Was there anyone from your family that you wrote about? If someone in your family read it, would they say, oh,
Well,
he took me and that's that?
The only person in the family that's in the book is there's a Jewish tax lawyer. I gave myself a cameo role, but other than that, I left everybody
Elliot
else.
Foxman.
Elliot Foxman.
And Elliot was from Beverly Hills.
Elliot was from Beverly Hills.
So we have Beverly Hills in our
Yes,
story, right?
yes, yes.
And how did you know Elliot Foxman? He was a real person.
He was a real person. He was a psychoanalyst, and a friend of mine
Oh, that's what he was.
had seen him, and I met him, and he made a very nice impression on me. So, you know, 50 years later, may he rest in peace, his name is in this book.
So 2 of the characters are like the main characters. You have
Yes.
2 main characters. And then all the other ones seem to be like collateral damage. They're all creating things that are going on for you to build the story. So tell us about Patty, who is one of the main characters,
Okay.
Patty Moran, and Pilar Velezquez. What's her name?
Pilar Quintanilla Galt.
Oh,
Later,
Galt.
Simon.
Okay.
Well,
I thought
Patty,
it was quinceañera. So I was going like, oh, quinceañera, the 15-year-old.
Oh no, she's a little older than 15 when the book starts. So Patty Moran is a Irish cop from Brooklyn who comes to Houston to be a cop, and then he finds out that if he wants to achieve the kind of recognition and respect that he wants, he has to choose a different path. So he went to night law school. Pilar is from Houston, from the barrios, and she was in an abusive marriage, and so she gets a divorce. And then as a temp, she turned a temp job into a relationship with the richest man in town. And her life and Patty's life converge at various important times in both of their lives.
So I like the way you build the story because the chapters are short, but they're right to the point and they're very descriptive. And Houston becomes a part of the book. Are those places true? Are those real places you talk about? like the streets and the buildings.
All the streets and buildings are real. The restaurant, which is called Elegante in the book, is really Tony's, where I've had dinner with you.
I know Tony's very well. We've gone to Tony's for years and years, but it was in the old place. When I went to dinner with you the other day, it's in the new building. And how did he make that transition? Because we have a lot of that going on. You know, we have restaurants that are in old kind of buildings that we've known and that we go to in Beverly Hills, and all of a sudden that building goes down and they have to transfer it to something else.
Well, I think it was just maybe it had something to do with the landlord. I don't know.
But I mean, how did he make a go of it? He had to go to a new building and he had to make a go of it.
It was a go of it before, yes.
Yeah.
So the current building, his main competitor used to be in that building, and they went out of business. And so he took over that location.
Because we had like Spago and the Bistro. Yeah. Mr. Chow, of course, is in the same building, so he hasn't moved. But those kind of restaurants that are hits and that we're so used to going to had to change not because of rents or anything, but because the buildings were changing.
Yeah.
So it was something before. I didn't realize that.
Yes.
And he is like a confidant. He's a Luigi.
Yes, he is Luigi, and he's a good friend to everybody in the book.
So with the other people, when I talked about like collateral, I didn't know how else to say it, but they're like secondary characters that drive the story, I guess.
Yes.
You have all these women in Houston, like we have here, who are educated, and they have these duties to their husband to stay at home and be stay-at-home wives and entertain the lawyers. I don't think that's happening today, but that happened during my time as well.
I think it still happens.
You do?
Not to the same extent, but it still happens.
So what do these women do?
Well,
they go to law school, they become lawyers, and then they further their husband's position?
You know,
or they entertain? What do they do?
They entertain. They get immersed in charitable community activities.
Which is great. That's a great part.
And some of them have careers of their own.
Do you think it's like in one of the things that you talked about, you said, does dress for success matter? Like to be in public places. Is that important?
Some people think it's important. And certainly Patty Moran thought it was important. And
so what was his idea?
His idea was that if he was in the right places and dressed appropriately, that he would elevate the class of his clientele. And it worked.
And it worked. And it does, I guess. It impresses people. You have a funny story. We were talking. I just mentioned the bistro. I didn't realize. Yes, right. But you had a funny story when you were first here in Beverly Hills.
So I was poor and totally green, you know, and so I go to bistro with my wife, and they bring the bill, and it says B&B, $1.50. And I said to the waiter, "We didn't have brandy and Benedictine." And he said, "That's for bread and butter."
That was a table charge, right? That was a cover charge.
And I just was mortified.
But it was very French.
They saw me coming.
No, they didn't see you coming. It was very French at that time. So talking, I mean, that's like one of the social issues we have. B&B charges, different things on tips that are prescribed and on there, or, as you say, dressing for fame, or educated wives doing kind of what seems menial after their thing. And you bring up a lot of these social issues in the book, and I'm going to ask you about some of the issues that you brought up, because I think you had a whole list of them, like addiction.
Yes, addiction and self-empowerment for women. I think the women characters in the book, frankly, are strong and admirable. Pilar starts at the bottom. She has a very embarrassing experience at the beginning. And then she improves, she gets in the relationship, she marries this wealthy man, but then she thinks she gained too much weight, so she's into booze and prescription medicine, and she's about to lose him, and she's driving one day and she goes into her old neighborhood and there's a clinic, and she takes over the running of the free clinic in the barrios, and it really gives her a lot of self-esteem and makes her a much stronger person.
It does, and she's doing good. I mean, and it helps her get rid of her addiction.
Yes.
Another thing is like tax evasion. There's a lot of like Ponzi schemes. You seem to make that Ponzi scheme work. You know, it looks like it's working, and
it looks
those
like
people
it's working.
fall for it.
Well, the thing is that there's an old saying: if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. The problem is, if you're from Houston, all these things that are too good to be true have happened. I mean, we're a major port. We're 50 miles inland. We built the Astrodome. You know, the first.
We lost the World Series.
Yeah, we just lost the World Series. But anyway, but we've done. There's a lot of things that have happened in Houston that were too good to be true. So when somebody comes along with something that really isn't, people might believe it anyway.
Oh, because there were so many. That's how. Why
Yeah.
do people get
I mean,
fooled?
Heart transplants. We're about to
Right.
complete the first mechanical heart.
Right. Well, do they get fooled because they don't want to pay taxes?
Some of them don't want to pay taxes. Some of them want to make money, you know.
And then
No.
bribes. You bring up bribes.
Yes, I am not a fan of the system of how judges are elected. And so I'm not saying that there's any corrupt judges in Houston, but you give money to their campaigns, and maybe you give them baseball tickets, or maybe you take them on a vacation or something like that. And then maybe you get better results in their court.
You do that with your doctors too.
Yes.
Kind of,
Well, I hope
yeah.
I get better results with the
Yeah.
doctors.
Okay. Deceit. Lots of deceit. I guess that's like lies too, right?
Yes.
And we talked about judicial corruption and tampering. Is justice blind? Is justice
It's supposed to be blind, but it can't be blind with greed.
with greed, right?
Right.
Well, and then there's a lot of country club living because I don't know. It seems like Texas to me was always more around the country club.
Okay, so part of the conflict in the book, there's a lot of different conflicts, but part is between the country club set and the cafe society set.
Right.
And so that's part of it.
And the connections are made through the country club. I mean, people
Yes.
are kept out. Like Patty's kept out of the country club.
Right. So he's kept out, so he works the cafe society, and his partner is in the country club set, and he works that set.
So Patty is at Luigi's. Patty is at
Yes.
Elegante.
At Elegante.
And the other ones are at
River Oaks Country Club.
River Oaks.
Which is a real place.
Yeah, which is real. The thing that I liked about the book is that it's like Law 101. It's like you explain things so clearly that you don't feel like an idiot when you're reading it because it's explained for you.
I really appreciate your saying that.
How do you do that? Because it's concise.
Well, I try to make it easy. It's always been a rule of mine that whenever I write anything, I want it to be that someone who's in the 8th grade can understand it. And even if you have brilliant rocket scientists, they don't necessarily understand legal concepts. So if I can present them in a way that's
Right.
entertaining and interesting and informative, then that's what I do.
It is. It's informative. And sometimes you think, oh, where's this going? And then it's explained.
I
you
have
know?
a whole Socratic.
Oh, you have it next to you.
I have a whole Socratic thing where he goes to one of his professors
Right.
for help, and
Bingo.
the professor never Professor Bingo,
Professor Bingo.
who I named, whose real name was Alexander Porter, which was the name of the only black guy in my law school class who I've stayed friends with. But anyway, so the professor never gives him an answer, but keeps asking him questions until Patty figures out all the answers.
Well, because he's making you think. So he was a
Right.
great professor, right?
Yes, yeah.
Right. Are you still practicing?
Now I'm practicing about 10% because the book is taking like 5 to 10 hours a day, and it's new, it's fun, it's very invigorating. I'm having a good time.
Different kind of problems.
Yeah.
Do you still find the same problems practicing that you did before?
I've limited my practice the last 15 or 20 years to tax controversies, as opposed to tax planning and doing documents and things
What's
like
the controversy? What are they?
It's trial work.
Oh.
It's where the IRS thinks somebody owes more money than they pay.
And then you have to go in and...
Right.
I see.
Sometimes, if they're smart, they come to me before the IRS gets to them, and then we see
But
if we
how
can.
do they know? They don't know.
They know if they didn't file a return. They
that
know
way.
if they didn't report a foreign bank account. They
know those things?
Yeah.
I see. The one thing that I thought was not lacking, but being in Houston so much and being in Dallas so much, I know I go to the cultural events. And this was like, you talked about your wealthy people giving to the symphony or whatever, but it didn't touch on the buildings, the cultural part of Houston.
Well, actually, there's one whole scene that is a poetry reading.
Right.
Of the Margaret Root Brown imprint reading series, and it's at one of those buildings. And there are other scenes that are at some of those buildings, like the Wortham.
The Wortham, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the scenes is at the Worthams. I try to, but one of the great things about Houston is how well they have supported the arts.
Oh, I know. That's why I was really surprised. And maybe that wasn't part of this book. Maybe it was just that you're...
Well, it's mentioned, but I didn't, except for that one scene where I have Marie Howe at a poetry reading.
Yeah.
And she influences
and she fell
Pilar.
in love with poetry, right?
Yes.
Fell in love with poetry. Do you do a lot of book signings now? You said the book takes up time.
yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
Book signings, social media stuff. I have a social media consultant. I have a publicist. And they keep me busy.
When you go to the book signings, what do they ask you? What's the question you get asked the most?
Actually, is there going to be a sequel, or is there going to be a movie?
Yeah, is there going to be a movie?
I hope so. I will confess that when I created Pilar, I kept seeing Jennifer Lopez in my. She's flawed. She's gorgeous. She takes you in. She may not be the most beautiful woman you've ever seen, but she's the one that everyone in the room gasps.
But when you're writing, are you thinking about a movie script? Are you thinking about a movie star who's playing Patty, or an actor who can play someone else?
I was thinking about it being a movie. I wasn't necessarily casting it, except for Pilar. But I think, for Patty, Christian Bale could play anybody.
Oh, he's so great.
Yes, he could play anybody. But there's a lot of great actors these days.
So what happens with a book and to be made into a movie? How does that happen?
I sure want to know.
Out there.
Yes,
Does anyone know how to do that?
But I will say that everyone who has read the book has said, oh, it's going to be a movie, isn't it? Or it's going to be a Netflix or a Prime series. So I don't know. We can hope.
Another thing, just to divest from our book, because we're running out of time, is that you had a funny story about Van Cleef and Arpels. It's on Rodeo Drive. And the great thing about Van Cleef right now is they have an exhibition of all their vintage things, which I wanted to tell you so you could go see it. And you had an experience there.
Oh, yeah. My daughter lived in Los Angeles for a while, and so we're walking down Rodeo Drive, and we go into Van Cleef and Arpels, and they say, oh, hello, Nicole. And I knew, I said, this is a problem. This is not a good thing if they know her by first name at that store.
So that shows how small our village is.
Yes.
And how great it is. The best people, what does that mean?
Well, there's some irony to it. The woman that has the Ponzi scheme has she's not accepted particularly socially, so she's trying to buy her way in, and she has a group she calls the best people and invites them to wine tastings and things like that. So some of the best people really aren't.
That's a good way to stop.
Okay.
Thank you, Marc
Well, thank
Grossberg,
you,
for
Joan.
being so good to see you again after all these years. And thank you for watching the Beverly Hills View. We'll see you next time. I'm Joan Agajanian Quinn.